Everywhere I go, people ask me about my amazing 3,000 mile per gallon car. They say, "Hey, what about your amazing 3,000 mile per gallon car?" And I have to tell them, it's just an ordinary car. It is. I mean, sure, I clean the windshield when it needs it and I change the oil, but it's an ordinary car, just like everyone else's. Then people ask me, how can that be? I mean, everyone else considers himself lucky to get 30 miles per gallon, and you say you get 3,000? I mean, how is that possible? And that's when I have to tell them that it started one day in the lab. You see, I was running a series of time dilation experiments, you know, the standard series. I guess you know this, but for years now, scientists have been aware that if you do something, an ordinary something you do every day, but you do it at a different speed, you do it faster or slower than you would ordinarily do it, it affects the flow of time. And of course, they've known this for a long time, but see, in the past, no one had ever been able to do this for more than a few seconds, a few minutes at the most. And what I wanted to know was, what would happen if you perform this experiment for a long period of time, say a day, a whole day moving at, for example, half speed? Would your watch slow down to half speed for the whole day? Or would there be some sort of variable involved, a sliding scale? Well, anyway, no one knew this, so that was my experiment. So what I did was, I went to the lab, started my daily procedures, and I did everything at half speed. And sure enough, my watch slowed down, and I kept moving along at half speed, doing everything that I would normally do. And before I knew it, my watch said 1 o'clock, which meant it was 5 o'clock everywhere else, so it was time to go home, right? So, you know, when you're doing something like that, it's hard to just stop doing it. I mean, it's real easy to stop moving at a different pace. I mean, it's impossible not to, almost, but it's hard to want to stop doing it, if you get my drift. So I thought, well, I've been doing this all day at half speed, so why don't I go home at half speed? So I did. I slowly turned off the lights in the lab and slowly walked out to my car and got in and started to drive home, slowly. And as I was driving along, I slowly looked down at my fuel gauge and noticed that I was just about out of gas. And being the scientist that I am, I decided, whoa, I better stop and get some gas for the old car. So I pulled into the station, you know, the one on the corner, the self-service job down there, and I slowly got out of the car, walked around to the back, opened up the little spout, and I slowly reached out, took the little handle down off the pump, put the little spout in the little filler, and I slowly squeezed the handle. And that's when it came over me, this overpowering urge to pull it out and just squirt gasoline all over the place. And I did. I squirted in the air, and I whipped it around. I was spraying everyone standing around me. It went all over the car, all over myself. And it took an extreme act of willpower, everything I had, to force that hose back into the tank and finish filling my tank. And I did it. The tank was full, and I was standing there, my heart pounding, my breath going like this. And I thought, oh boy, I've really done it now. What in the world was that all about? I said, look, I've got to get out of here, but I got to pay for this gas. There's no telling how much I wasted. So I rushed over to the little window there where the attendant is and tried to apologize. I said, look, man, I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me there. But he was wearing one of these little Walkman radio things. He couldn't hear me. So I said, look, you know, how much do I owe you for all this gas I wasted? And he said, $7. Yeah, I see what you mean. That old clunker there, it does seem like a waste sometimes putting gas in a car like that, doesn't it? Ooh. I said, hey, look, man, here's your $7. I got to get out of here. So I rushed back over to the car. I got in, and I started driving, but I was just too rattled. So I just pulled out of the station, across the street, into a little parking lot there, and I turned the car off, and I sat and tried to get a grip on myself. And I sat there, and I took a deep breath, and I looked up at the sky, and then I remembered that I had forgot to move slowly while I was at the station. So I took another slow, deep breath, and another, and thought, what in the world was that just came over me? what in the world was that all about? And my heart began to slow down a little, and I got a little better control of myself and said, well, look, there was apparently no harm done there. So why don't I drive home? I seem to be okay now. I'll drive home, and maybe in the safety of my own home, I can sit and figure out just what that was that happened to me back there. So I slowly reached out, started the car, and I slowly looked in the mirror to check to see if any traffic was coming, to see if it was safe to pull out back into the highway, and that's when I saw it. In the mirror, I could see, across the street in the station, some other poor slob squirting gasoline all over the place. He was putting it in his car, on the upholstery. He was putting it in the trunk. He was hosing down these guys that were standing behind him in line. I mean, it was exactly the same thing I had done a few minutes before. And just then, this tiny seed began to take hold. Just a tiny little germ of an idea. And I thought, this bears further investigation. So slowly I reached out. I turned the car off. And I sat and I watched. And sure enough, every person that came into that station squirted gasoline all over the place like a maniac. And I thought, well, maybe it's something in the air. It can't be the water. I didn't drink anything there. But no, it's got to be more to it than that. I'm a scientist. I need to study this, but I need more data. So I've got to get a broader base to study. So I began to drive around slowly. I drove down the street a few blocks to the next station. I pulled over, hid behind some bushes there, and watched. And sure enough, every person that came into that station did exactly the same thing. He squirted gasoline everywhere, just one after another. Well, it took a while for me to get home that night. I drove around. It was after midnight. I went to every station in town. And in every station, every person that came in wasted gasoline. It was unbelievable. Well, like I said, it was midnight before I got home. But I didn't go to sleep. No, I was way too excited. My mind was racing with these ideas, very slowly. And then, when the sun was coming up, I had it. Not a theory, mind you. No theory. It's a law. I call it the law of 99.9. And this law states that whenever a person does anything, 99.9% of the energy that he expends in doing that thing goes to something other than the thing he's doing. Of course, when I tell people this, they always ask me, well, what does this have to do with your 3,000 mile per gallon car? And it's this. Whenever a person goes into a gas station to put gas in his car, his ordinary car, mind you, and by the way, any car can get 3,000 miles per gallon. That's hard to believe, too. But when he goes in to put gas in his little tank in his car, 99.9% of the gas goes on the upholstery, in the trunk, under the car, and that's it. When you go, if you want to get 3,000 miles per gallon, you go into the service station and you put the gas in the tank. Of course, I tell people this, and they look at me and go, like, are you crazy? They don't say that. They say, are you sure that that's the secret? And I say, yeah, that's the secret. And most people at that point, they turn and walk away. And they shake their head and they mutter, as if to say, that guy has to be just a walking nutcase. And I don't try to argue with them. I mean, after all, I do own one heck of a lot of stock in all the major oil companies now, and I'm buying more every day.